You're an agent and now it is closing time. Super excited. I was talking with a newer agent recently and realized that there are a few fundamental things that we as agents need to do to prepare for closing. So take your pen and paper out if you want, and let me go ahead and share with you the things that we should do as agents to prepare both our buyers and sellers for closing. I'm Kim Barber with Kim Barber Group and eXp Realty, and I've helped thousands of owners and agents with real estate since 2004. So if you are a listing agent, I want to share with you the things that will help both the buyer and the buyer's agent, as well as the seller as they prepare. So as the listing agent, we want to give some key and valuable information so the buyer can prepare for it becoming their new home. So what are these things? The first thing is share the utilities. So ask the seller, what are the utilities? And that could include the trash company, even sharing like the mowing company, in addition to things like what is the gas, the electric, the water company, and any other relevant. So if you have a septic, perhaps there's a septic service that's been on the house. And if you have trash that's not included in your HOA, then go ahead and find out like what are the companies that they're using so that they can transfer it over or find their own. So getting those utilities and those functional maintenance things are super important. The other thing that's going to be really important is, for example, if they're living in a townhome or a condominium, something as simple as what's the mailbox number? Where do you find that? This is something that gets fallen through the cracks. And so that is something that's super helpful. So these types of details really help the buyer prepare. And the other thing is not really a utility, but it is like, what is the internet and cable provider? So when you can make a list of each of these things, it really helps you as a listing agent do good work with the buyer and the buyer agent so that it's a smooth transition. You don't get that phone call later from either the buyer agent or the buyer themselves saying, I don't have any utilities, or the seller saying they didn't turn anything over and I'm now paying their bill, because that does happen. Okay, so those are some things that really just help in the transition. And then working with the buyer agent, one of the things that at least we do in Virginia, and I would hope that they do all over the country, is to prepare for the actual process of the closing. So the first thing is, are we going to close in two different locations? So is the seller going to be present when the buyer is present? So now that we're kind of past COVID, they're allowing a lot more of us to be back in person together. And that's kind of how it was for a long time, at least here in Northern Virginia. And so you want to coordinate the timing of the closing. And of course, that means the date. So the seller, why do I say the date? It's beyond the contract. But the seller, at least in Northern Virginia, and I think in most states, can often close ahead of the actual close date. They have less things to sign, and sometimes they're already moving or they're already out of the area. So that's one thing, and that would be considered a split settlement. So what is the time of the closing? Who's going to be present? And then coordinate like your side. The other thing is to coordinate the walkthrough with that buyer agent. So typically in our contracts, you are allowed to do it kind of up a week ahead, but the best practice is to do it like the day of closing or the day before. So as a buyer's agent, if you do it ahead of the closing, I recommend that you at least pop into that house and make sure no pipes have burst, there's not anything funny, there's been no break-in, because that has happened before to us, where we went and popped in just to make sure, and we looked up in the infamous ceiling and there was a water stain. So things do happen, and I think it's a responsibility for us to make sure right before closing that we inspect the house. So then that really talks about like the interaction of right up against the closing. So as a buyer agent, for representing you with the buyer, it's a lot of coordination again with the title company. So the title company, when are we going to settle? Does the buyer have all the paperwork that they need from you, as well as the lender? So there is supposed to be some disclosures that get to the buyer from the lender 3 days ahead. So really it's their job, but as a buyer agent, we want to check in. Do you have those disclosures? You want to get your calendar out and just check and make sure. If not, you're going to run into a problem with actually closing on time. The other thing is, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, do you know how much you need to bring to the closing table? That again is often coordinated with the lender, and in our area, the title company really gives some of the ultimate numbers because they calculate the taxes and the HOA, which the lender is really going to kind of guess on based on their research already. So they want to know from the buyer, do you know when the settlement is? Is it scheduled? Have you had all the disclosures from the lender, and that at least like 3 or 4 days ahead of time to match that legal requirement? Do you have all the utility information, and have you then transferred everything into your name? Do you know how much money you need to bring to the closing table? Have we scheduled the walkthrough? Have you coordinated the time off of work? And then perhaps sometimes we have to give them guidance on how much time they would take. So these are the things that are going to occur like in that last week. Okay, so from a listing agent perspective, we're dealing with the seller. And there's really a little bit less to do because we don't have all that lending and the money paperwork. For our sellers, we want to make sure, like, are you living local and do you want to close with the buyers at the same time? Can you coordinate the times at the same time? That would influence it. And does that day work? If not, we can close ahead. Perhaps if your seller is out of town, there's a couple ways that they can do it. So they need to coordinate with the title company and make sure, A, the title company knows that they're going to do like a mail away, they call it, or a remote closing. The title company will then reach out with your seller. They should coordinate together, but you need to be kind of in the loop to make sure the process is happening. And then they are going to typically then coordinate with wherever they're at, a local notary that can go to their location, or they go to the notary's location, however that's going to play out, meaning the notary comes to the seller's location or the seller goes to the notary's location, and then they sign it remote. And we have to realize that the paperwork needs to get to the seller because the seller has to FedEx it back. Now, in some cases, they can do some stuff with the digital signing, but lean into the title company to make those calls. Okay, so then what else do we need to do besides making sure that they know the time? You're going to want to tell your sellers, basically, like, bring your driver's license, make sure you show up, and then bring the checkbook so you can give them a voided check, and then they can wire the money, or they can cut you a check and you can pick it up, or if you're that comfortable, they can mail it to you. Up to you what you prefer. So again, that's what you're going to say to the seller. Why do I need a checkbook? Because I need to know where to send the money. Or if your seller actually owes a little bit of money, they can stroke the check, coordinate with the title company. So a little bit less work on the seller side, but then you want to make sure that the seller gives that information through you to the buyer agent so they can get to the buyer about the utilities, the cable, the maintenance, and all those kinds of things. If you set all this up like in the week or even before, it's nothing wrong with scheduling settlements like 2 weeks before, getting all of this information. Some buyers like to be super proactive in getting the utility set up, but in that week, you need to make sure that you have all the boxes checked, and that makes for a smooth settlement. Everybody's prepared. You're looking nice and professional, which is what we want to do, and that's how you do it. Now, if you found that helpful, please do me a favor, give me the thumbs up. If you have questions, comment below. And if you found this helpful, I provide weekly information that's designed to help you increase your success. Please do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to giving you more information to increase your success.